Bridget.
Thank you, Suhail, and thank you everybody for inviting me today, for your interest in the economy for the common good, and welcome to those listening online. What beautiful values, the United Nations values, and it's not a surprise you invited me to speak, because the values that underpin the economy for the common good model are clearly very much aligned. And let's just celebrate our love for these values and what brings us here today. Very grateful. I'll just say a few things about my journey with economy for the common good, which I'll abbreviate to ECG throughout my talk. So I first came into contact 10 years ago with ECG at an information meeting, sitting on the grass in Regent's Park, when a member of the international team who was living in London hosted an information meeting. And from that time, I started volunteering. A group of us started to host meetings in London. And after a while, a core group formed and we set up the National UK Association. And we started by translating a lot of the materials, because it was very much a sort of German-speaking movement at the time, with Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and German-speaking parts of Italy. So we did a lot of work translating the materials and getting more and more involved at an international level. And in 2018, we helped to set up the International Federation of the Economy for the Common Good. And I became one of the management team members for the Federation. Those are the steps, but how it affected me personally, when I was sitting on the grass in Regent's Park, I had a wave of relief hearing about this model and hearing that things can be done differently. The economy is human designed, and we can design it differently. And getting involved with the movement, I was very struck by the way they conducted meetings, that it was calm, respectful, deliberative discussions, and their method of decision making, using a methodology called systemic consensus, which doesn't just choose the favoured option of a slim majority, but chooses the least unacceptable option for everyone. And that really is game changing in terms of inclusion and agreement. And I've been really struck by how holistic the model is, and its vision, and how it's resonated with people all around the world in different contexts. And I've felt incredibly privileged to be part of the project, and I've met some really fantastic people. And so lovely to spread that with you today and meet even more. So we'll have a look at, I can't move it on, so I'll just press that.
If you press this, it should move. Okay.
Okay, lovely. So as we've heard, the economy for the common good, the goal is the common good, not money or the maximisation of profit. You're hearing a lot more about that. So just a quick look at the agenda. I'll do a short introduction about the history of ECG. We'll look at the reasons why do we need an alternative economic system. We'll have a look at the model and I'll talk you through the balance sheet and how that works in practice for companies. And then we'll look at some applications, and if we have time, I'll talk about the common good product as well. So ECG was a grassroots movement. It was set up 15 years ago by Christian Felber and a group of fellow activists following the financial crash of 2007 and 8. And this group felt there was a better way of doing business and a better way of organising ourselves. Christian has written a book. The English version is called Change Everything, which is not quite true. I'm not changing everything. Economy for the Common Good. It's published by Z Books, and I would recommend you get it directly from them, and please don't use Amazon. So ECG started out in 2010 as a grassroots volunteer movement, organised into self-organising local groups, a bit like the UNA Harpenden. You'd get an ECG Harpenden. Some countries have established national associations, and in 2018, as I said, the International Federation for the Economy for the Common Good was established, grouping the national associations together. And today those countries are Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, Chile, Argentina, and most recently, Japan. Japan has got a very active core group. They've set up a national association. They've begun doing the business consultancy training. And one of their members is a prominent figure in the movement for nuclear disarmament. And she's written a very interesting paper on nuclear disarmament and the economy for the common good. So why do we need an alternative economic system? Deep breath. I think we're all pretty much aware of the state of our current world, of the polycrises, of the wars of aggression, the increasing militarization, power concentration, inequality, cost of living, and the severe threat to our life support system through climate change and the depletion of Earth's resources. And we'll go through not all of those, but just a few, as I'm sure that you're already greatly aware. So the guiding compass, what we're looking for is which is beautifully illustrated by Kate Raworth's Donut Economics. Is anybody familiar with this model? So Kate has developed this model, the outer, so the ideal is that we live in the green space of the donut, which is the safe and just space for humanity. And this is the space where we're keeping within the planetary boundaries. So those are the boundaries you see on the outside. And so they markate things like climate change, ocean acidification, air pollution, biodiversity loss. They're the Earth's natural boundaries beyond which we must not exceed. And the sad news is that we've already exceeded 6 out of 9 of them. The inner circle represents the social foundation beneath which we shouldn't fall. So this is where human needs are met. And so things like food and water and energy and housing and employment. So to keep within that green space is what we're heading towards. And as Kate says herself, that we need to turn today's economies, which are degenerative by default, into ones that are regenerative by design. So instead of business as usual, where we take, make and discard, we should be focusing on create to regenerate, creating a circular instead of a linear economy. But as it is, we're using the Earth's resources at a faster rate than Earth's capacity to regenerate them. Earth Overshoot Day fell on August the 1st last year, and this signifies that we're using nature 1.7 times faster than our planet's ecosystems can regenerate. And so it's taking us 1 3/4 Earths every year. And this can be evident in deforestation, in soil, in biodiversity loss, the buildup of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which leads to more frequent extreme weather events and reduced food production. And the UN estimates that we only have 60 years of harvests left because of the erosion of topsoil. And if we remain fixated to profit maximization and to GDP growth, this is only going to get worse. It's been shown that emissions reductions that some countries have achieved through absolute decoupling fall far short of the Paris compliant targets. And so it would take these countries an average of 220 years to reduce their emissions by 95%, emitting 27 times their remaining 1.5 fair shares. And I know, Sahel, that you've read Jason Hickel's Less is More book, and that I do also recommend that as a read. And he also touches on the great inequality of the current system, that 92% of total global emissions in excess of the planetary boundary is caused by the global north. The global south is responsible for about 8%, but it's the global south that suffers more of the consequences. 90% of the economic costs, 98% of climate-related deaths are suffered in the south. And we have that global inequality worldwide in terms of income inequality, with 55% of the world's population only having 1% of global income. We have increasing inequalities within our own countries, where people are not able to meet basic needs. Even for those in work, there is in-work poverty. And this growing inequality leads to loss of trust in the political system, as well as not meeting basic human needs. A report from Varieties of Democracy, VDEM, at the University of Gothenburg shows the decline in democracies over the last 10 years and the rise of authoritarianism. The world has fewer democracies, 88 countries, than autocracies, 91 countries, for the first time in 20 years. 3/4 of people in the world now live in autocracies. And the favourite weapon of autocracies is media censorship, followed by undermining elections and civil society. And it doesn't help that the media is often controlled by wealthy individuals, and this concentration of power skews the democratic process. So there's a growing consensus that business, and that business as usual, is failing to take care of the planet and society as a whole. Margaret Thatcher once famously said that there is no alternative, Tina, there is no alternative to capitalism, to the neoliberal model which uses GDP as a measure, dependent on perpetual growth at 3% a year, tightly coupled to resource use. However, she's been proved wrong. We have tapas. There are plenty of alternatives. Economy for the common good is but one approach in a healthy ecosystem, which works towards shaping an ethical, common good oriented economy that works on 3 levels: improving and strengthening the commons, improving and democratizing public goods, and reshaping markets and converting them into servants for the common good. So what is the common good model? ECG is a holistic model and sees the economy as simply an instrument embedded in the context of the larger society, which decides the democratic rules and values which govern the economy, and not vice versa. The economic system should know, consider, respect, and protect its broadest context, which is life, ecosystems, and ecology. So it's about embedding the economy to its place within its proper context. And Christian Falber and 2 colleagues have written an academic paper explaining the economy for the common good model, and doing that by contrasting it to the neoclassical model. And this is their definition of economy: meeting the needs of living and future generations within the ecological planetary boundaries aligned with democratic values. Excuse me. So what we need is a realignment of success with our values. And the current way of measuring success in our economy is through profit maximization and capital growth, whereas the measure of success in the common good economy is measuring the common good. So what are the metrics for this? At the macro economy level, the current measure is GDP, so it's a monetary factor. But this provides no information on the well-being of people or planet. In a common good economy, the measure of success would be against the use of universal values measured by the common good product. And this would be generated by citizens through citizens' assemblies, deciding what the key headlines are for a good life in society. So looking at those values. At the microeconomy level, the measure of success is the financial balance sheet, but this provides no information on job security, equal pay, workplace satisfaction, the effects of the company on society through extraction, through pollution. In a common good economy, it would be the common good balance sheet, which is a measure of to what extent a company adheres to these values. And it's all about repegging the economy back to the values which are set out in democratic constitutions, if you're a country lucky to have one. we see that the public good is mentioned, and even for America, the idea is to promote the general welfare. So maybe somebody needs a big reminder about that. So what is the common good balance sheet? It's guided by these four values of human dignity, solidarity, environmental sustainability, and transparency and co-determination. And the values are measured against the 5 stakeholder groups of an organisation: suppliers, owners, employees, customers, and the social environment and for future generations. And it's a series of questions to the company of what is happening within the core operations. It's not about the old social responsibility that did something nice with the profit. This is about examining every aspect of a company's operations. And so there are some searching questions in terms of, for the owners, where is the equity coming from? The ideal is that it's from those that are closestly associated with the organisation, not a remote investor, because having to service a remote investor might skew the mission and purpose of your organisation. The design of products and services, how is that designed in such a way that has a low impact on society? Can the parts be separated, reused, recycled? Is there inbuilt obsolescence, or is it really robustly constructed to last longer? There are some quite new for the mainstream questions in terms of relationship with customers, and the strategy is cooperation, not competition. So when you have a customer and you can't meet their needs, do you recommend another company that does? So the aim is meeting the customer needs, not your own profit level. There's questions about how are you encouraging your customers to consume less? And we're calling that sufficiency. The French have used the word sobriety. So can we really examine, do we really need things? And what is the company doing to encourage people to buy less and to use less? And we do have examples of this with companies setting up repair services for their products, or second-hand and exchange, and encouraging kind of alternatives. So it does radically rechange the way a company sees itself in relation to society and what its role is. And so just quickly looking through, so the primary benefit for the company is it's contributing to social change. And the balance sheet, whilst it's a snapshot of the company's activities at a certain moment, it also provides an improvement plan for the company to say, okay, well, I did well in this area, but in this other area, I'm going to make that my next focus. And it can be a very powerful way to actually complete a common good balance sheet. One way is to allow employees to cluster into groups, say in stakeholder groups, and research that area for themselves. And they're investigating questions, they're finding out about the other areas of a company, and it's raising the consciousness of all the staff. And companies that I've spoken to have said that the actual process of doing it released so much energy. People felt, very they were recognised beyond their job description, that they had something else that they could offer. They understood more about how their role fitted in with others. And it raises the company's profile externally. They found that they had lots of applications, what you call them, unsolicited applications, very highly qualified people applying, because they want to work in this sort of environment and atmosphere. And we know from a Gallup poll that about 2/3 of workers find no meaning in their work. So it's a very powerful tool, and even actually doing the process unleashes a lot of energy. And the idea is that legislation will adapt, so that companies that are doing the right thing, that are internalizing their costs and externalizing benefits, have advantages in the marketplace. Whereas currently, we have an example of one of our companies, Vaude, that produces things like my rucksack, kind of outdoor equipment. And they were a company which we took to the United Nations in Geneva when they wanted examples of companies meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. And Vaude works really, really hard. They're very frequently, like almost every year, voted the most sustainable company in Germany. And they've made a huge effort to source other ways of making their products. So, for example, they use a plant-based oil to make the plastic toggle. They use a kind of milk fiber for the lining for their walking boots. And they're offering a repair service, and they've developed a whole range of sustainable activities and benchmarks. And what her plea was at the United Nations was, this is an unlevel playing field. We're doing our best, but in the marketplace there are cheaper products that are using damaging materials. They're being thrown away because they're so cheap. You know, people leaving tents at festivals. So the idea is that those companies who are doing things like a common good balance sheet should receive, for example, reduced tax rates, low interest rates for loans, priority in public procurement. So it kind of makes it a more even playing field. And in completing a common good balance sheet, it's very clear how the SDGs are met. All the materials for ECG are open source, published under Creative Commons, and they're available on the website. If you wanted to go further into the matrix and the handbook, it's all online. I'm aware that I'm about kind of 4 minutes short of my time. What I'll do is I'll go through quickly, and I think a lot of the other things might come out in the questions. So just for the last few minutes, we'll just take a look at what's happening in practice. So we have a range of organisations who are completing a common good balance sheet. In terms of the companies, it's mainly small and medium-sized companies. We have a few larger ones. And a few with international operations, and they range from companies you'd expect, like organic food producers, but also newspaper, banks. We have Elobar is a manufacturer of sensor technology. So it's a range of organizations. And this is Antje von David from Vaude, who we've spoken about, and their balance sheet. And companies, you know, sometimes choose not to address all of the areas. For some of the family-owned businesses, for example, they prefer to keep it as a family-owned business. And so you can see on this certificate, it scores lower in that area. And so it's down for companies to choose where they want to prioritise. We have companies around the world. We have the first company in Latin America, in Uruguay, a laboratory company who's just certified. And the other thing, before I finish, to mention is we have the Common Good Balance Sheet, and it's used by other organisations, not just companies, but universities, cities, and we talked about the common good product, and for regions, cities and communities, there's various ways of them of engaging in ECG. They can adopt policies to support the values and that way of kind of operating in their area. They can do a common good balance sheet themselves. We have many cities who are promoting the common good balance sheet to companies and organisations in their area. And so they subsidise the cost of the consultants to work with those companies. We have whole regions. The autonomous region of Valencia adopted ECG. They created a chair for ECG at the university, together with 3 other ethical chairs. The areas can choose to do a common goods index exercise. So that's like hosting a citizens' assembly where the citizens decide what are the areas that should be measured and should inform policy. And an example from a neighbourhood is here, and it's very much the type of things you'd find in the donut in terms of the social threshold, and things like flourishing relationships, trust, participation, stable ecosystems. So that's a sort of quick lightning tour through what's available for communities as well, and for that. And the focus is very much on the democratic participation. This is the underpinning of the model, that the economy has kind of moved away from how it should have been. It should be in service to the constitution. It should be in service to the people, to the general welfare. But it's now running through its own values, and those values are competition, egoism, and extraction. So it's about pegging it back to values and back to people's involvement. And we've seen through things like citizens' assemblies just how, with proper education, I mean, that's the great thing about citizens' assemblies, is you have experts explaining all the different areas, and so there's a true understanding of what are the issues. It's done over several weekends, so there's deliberative discussions. And in the citizens' assemblies that have been done on, I think there was one done even on Brexit, on abortion in Ireland, on topics you wouldn't have thought would come up with the results they did, but they all had. I mean, for the Brexit one that was conducted, both sides moved. And it's this idea of how can we kind of move towards the solutions that we can all live with. So I think I'll stop there, and other things might pop out in the question. Thank you.
Great.
That's fine, thanks.
Carry on. Okay, so take some questions.
I listened to the radio on theory that governments are trying to get farming to be more sustainable, encourage good practice. But I don't know of any legislation which is either restricting carrot, trying to get general companies to follow so the high stakeholder model. So if you know that, I mean, we've got a company like Timson. I don't know, I mean, that seems very ethical. Whether the government give any financial support.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I've been sort of working on the international level, and the European directive, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. I mean, of course, the UK is not part of Europe now, but it does affect companies that want to supply European companies. That's got a very high threshold, low threshold. It's going to target the kind of only the very largest companies. And ECG has been involved in kind of lobbying at a European level to improve those directives. And there's also a directive about directors' duties, directors' due diligence. So it is a real question about you know what we're requiring companies to do and to report on. There's been the kind of very loose ESG, kind of environment, social and governance, but that's very much a kind of self-reporting exercise, whereas on the sort of CSRD, there is now the idea of the double materiality. So a company not only saying, oh, the risks of climate change towards me are such, but you know, what are the risks to the society of what you're doing? And as I say, I'm not kind of very well up on the kind of the latest in UK legislation, but it's something that we could all focus on and ask for.
Question is the United Nations or organizations similar to championing ECG and degrowth and all that? Is there any mechanism or anything happening in that area?
Well, I mean, I can talk about this at the EU level. In 2015 and 2017, we presented an opinion it's called an opinion, to the EESC, the European Economic and Social Committee, or Council as it's called. And that's the body that represents the citizen voice that the Parliament and Commission must liaise with. So ECG presented the model and it was adopted by the EESC to say that this is a way of creating a sustainable economy and of meeting the SDGs. I was going to be picking your brains today, perhaps over lunch or afterwards, as to how ECG can advocate with the United Nations and what the possibilities there are. I mean, I mean, obviously there's that kind of alternative to GDP measure, which would be a very strong path. You asked about the sort of degrowth. The European Union has funded a project to investigate what does a post-growth economy look like. So there are researchers who are kind of looking into this, and there are various projects that are putting together different metrics. So they're investigating, I think it's called Merge, a whole kind of range of alternative metrics to GDP. So yeah, that's what I know so far.
What can you hear about the happiness? I never thought about it, but how do they do that?
I think that's the same, you know, the same concept as the common good product in that it involves the citizens in coming up with the measures, if you like. So it's which is how it should be, because it's, you know, how it's about our lives, what's important to us, and how are we going to see if it's improving or not. So yeah, those measures are kind of, yeah, ideally they're designed, you know, through people, through kind of the bottom up.
And you mentioned something that takes the least acceptable.
Well, Christian, when he gives his talks, does an exercise looking at income ratios. Because one, you know, we've talked about power concentration and wealth inequality. What do we think would be an equal distribution? So what he does, he collects suggestions from the audience, and has a sheet. So what do we think about everybody having the same? So that'd be 1 times. What do we think about the differential between the lowest and the highest being 2 or 5 or 10, 100, above 300? And I would ask you to show your resistance, meaning not the one you're voting for, but you know, what's your resistance? If I said, okay, we should all have the same, show me your resistance to that. And so the option that has the lowest resistance is the one that most people, you know, the large majority, not a slim majority, but a large majority can live with. He's conducted this exercise in probably over 50 countries, and it always ends up around between 10 is the most common occurring, that people can live with 10 times, and it's certainly between 10 and 20.
I mean, this number of countries or other, I mean, how big is the class? I mean, how is our unlimited? Is that from birth to see the light? It's a massive class. There's definitely carry on doing whatever they're doing. The world where how big is the class in order to achieve the majority? Is there a lot to do?
Christian, in a talk he gave the other day, said, you know, that it was a very slow growing movement. But it's not just economy for the common good that's going to change things. You know, we're just a part of this ecosphere of alternatives, and also people like yourselves. You know, it's only a collective, through collective action that any change is going to happen. And we shouldn't underestimate the influence that we have. And I think you talked of lethargy, and it can be overwhelming, can't it? It can be really, you know, the human suffering that we're seeing, the kind of, you know, the suffering to the natural world. I saw the David Attenborough new film, the Ocean film, where he kind of highlights the damage caused by the trawler, you know, what they call bottom trawler fishing, and these massive, they're like cities, these, but you see underwater the destruction in seconds, like a nuclear bomb's just gone off. And the point is not that, you know, coral reefs are beautiful and all these various fishes are beautiful, it's the interconnectedness. If the fish can't feed on the, you know, the plankton that we can't even see, then the whole chain's gone. And the, you know, the carbon that's released through this trawling. So yeah, that's about how we become kind of, you know, how not to get overwhelmed. How do we not get overwhelmed? But it's I think kind of in you spoke of lethargy, but it's also you know, they're just feeling it, you know, we feel it, don't we? And when we feel the negative things, that's a sign of what we love. And Joanna Macy, have you heard of Joanna Macy? The climate activist who's developed this, well, not just climate, I mean, yes, climate, but kind of world lover. She developed a model, I think it was a long time ago, and it was around kind of the nuclear, in response to nuclear, really, I think. It's called The Work That Reconnects, and it's about you know, exactly that kind of recognition that it's if we keep linking to what we love, you know, and that's the world, it's each other, it's the values that we know, that we can sense ourselves. And that's the other thing about the economy, isn't it? The Homo economicus, it's this super rational being. Do you know any super rational people? I mean, we have a multiple intelligence, and so her model is very life affirming, because it keeps us rooted in what we kind of know intuitively, what we sense, and also that I read an article recently. You know, we need to imagine it. We need to. I mean, it's not just imagining it; it's happening now. There are companies that are doing this in the face of all of the odds, because they're intrinsically motivated to do it. And it's not just ECG companies. You've mentioned Timpson's, and there are others that who you know, they know what path they're on, and they're going to carry on doing that. And I've lost my thread. But it's keeping on. I think that's right. It was Ethical Consumer magazine, which has been around since about 1989, I think. They're very good in terms of highlighting kind of the negative aspects of companies, but then recommending which are the positive ones to support. But they're now writing articles about challenging corporate power and envisaging, you know, doing away with the for-profit status. And one of their kind of lines was, you have to kind of have the vision to do it in order to do it. That's where it starts. So it starts with the intrinsic motivation and working towards it. And we know that things that have been structural, that we never thought would change, have changed. Some for good ways, and some quite recently in very bad ways. But it just shows you that it is possible.
Struggling with the system that we have. And then you say it's all got to change. I think evolution of two things would you simply say all the capital system, profit motive is wrong, and so it's not really, it's got the costs of the and the pros of that, but this will do that mess. So they'll sweep away the plus, and that's changing. I think the chances of success, you can say. With the big shared space, airline company, real. How do we change over? Energy creation. Creation causes possibly. How are we going to change that? So they don't just talk about small things, and they can use the right type of impact on the world as a whole, those kinds of things, big and small. So big companies have to target, not the small ones. And how we target those, how we change leadership. Sure.
Well, I think the first thing to say is, when I commented on Christian's book, it's called Change Everything, but it's a misleading title because it's not about changing everything. It's about reshaping markets. I mean, markets have existed long before the neoliberal system, but it's about repurposing them. And we respect institutions, we respect constitutions, and it's about having increasing the capacity of citizens to have more say in things. And for us to kind of say what we require from companies and set the values. So it is more tweaking than radical wholesale change, and it's actually about repegging it back to what it was supposed to be in the first place. It's an excellent suggestion. I mean that's it's a really great comment, because I mean, I wish my colleague was here, who's an eco-psychologist, and she'd be able to talk about what she understands as what's going on with people like Trump and autocrats. From my own experience, and one of the other methodologies that ECG acknowledges is the method of non-violent communication. It was elaborated by Marshall Rosenberg, and so this is a kind of sort of radical listening approach and being non-judgmental, and really listening to understand what are your so-called enemies' needs. What is motivating them to behave in the way that they're behaving. And I think it is that, isn't it? It's like I said, in the citizens' assemblies, where with the kind of media nowadays, we're so quick to kind of judge and cancel and polarize, and that's being fueled by social media and encouraged by certain groups on social media. And so, yeah, how do we train ourselves to kind of stay with conversations, to listen to things that are uncomfortable? Yeah.
Thank you. This is just an extension of my last point. The democracy itself is at the moment, in the sense that the governments are driven by short-termist ideas.
Mm-hmm.
The system that we have in our democracy takes 4, 5, 6 year term, and you have to have a much longer time scale for these things. So I'm just wondering whether your organisation also has political lobby groups to get what we want across, and also that democracy itself and vulnerable to populist ideas that are very much right now across Europe, and the concerns that populist approach not necessarily have common good in the common good. So these are issues to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ECG is non-partisan. It would, if a political party wanted to kind of hear about the model, then we would engage with them, but also offer opportunities to other parties. Our kind of lobbying at the moment is at that sort of legislative level, like with the EU. But there are some alliances in Germany that have taken up the values of ECG as political alliances. So it is being picked up by politicians and political parties.
They have had to do something to change and transform to affect ideas. How much are these concepts flourished in the UK or capitalist countries? I'm surprised you have that. Is it very difficult to
Yeah, but they're kind of still have more social democratic flavour than we do, and I think the UK and the US have really taken the capitalism and the neoliberal model kind of much further with a more consequent effect on society than in Europe, I think. And certainly in the UK, we did have interest from some local councils and from some companies, but there was an accountancy firm, triple bottom line accounting, really, and still do, really in favour of the model, and they advocate for it. But it felt like a kind of step too far for them, so they've they've started with their own carbon footprinting tool, which they then train their clients in. But they're very clear that ECG is the destination, that it's stepping through these other things, and a common balance sheet would be the kind of the ultimate for them. But yes, it's a very different climate here, I think.
And then the concepts are quite logical. Most I think it is also, I mean, if you approach Musk or Bezos, if you can convert one of those guys, you've got a lot of power, isn't it? Why did that change? I mean, we need champions like that.
Yeah.
The most evil person, for example, to become a very good person.
Yeah.
So, but my question is, how much do you do education of children? Do you go on to school? Because they are the ones who are likely to be most could be in you're working with the children are probably the best audience to get on the inside.
Yes, we have a number of international hubs, so they're sort of working groups. Well, and one of them is in education. So there are people who go into schools and explain the concepts. They've devised some really nice games, the kind of board games, and where they can look at, say, sort of chocolate and how chocolate's produced and the chain for chocolate. And then with older ones, kind of comparing the models. And there's in universities, there are kind of modules in ECG and I think a master's program. And there's various colleges that are training students in the model, and they get practical experience. So they get attached to a company and they help the company do the balance sheet. So they're kind of learning about it, and they're being matched with a company to do it as well. So yeah, there's a whole education arm, and we have an academic hub as well. So we host an international conference every 2 years, and the last one, which was in the Netherlands, was about converging the future fit models. So we had the donut economics there, solidarity economics, there are various kind of academic papers written, and we produce our own policy papers. There's a policy paper on the common good product, and Christian has written a paper on ethical world trade, and that would possibly be interesting for you because that's about the United Nations as well. So the United Nations ethical trade zone. So it's about concept of creating that. And there's also a kind of summary paper with that.
Some of us are going to lunch afterwards. But otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you to those online.
Thank you. For those online, we'll now switch off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, over lunch we'll talk about how you and look at lots of things we can do to more business, I think.